Welcome, scholars and researchers, to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here with us because we are about to embark on a rigorously deep, exhaustive, forensic analysis of biblical human ontology. Specifically, we're going to contrast the biblical framework with ancient Near Eastern idolatry protocols. Now, this isn't just going to be some surface-level overview, okay? We are going to dive layer by layer into the historical grammatical architecture of the text itself. Our goal is to truly understand the profound ontological warfare happening between the Creator's living design and humanity's artificial substitutions. It's a massive topic, so let's jump right into this fascinating material. Just to quickly map out our journey, here is our agenda for the Explainer. 1. We'll look at lexical distinctions. 2. The divine creation protocol. 3. Idolatry as recursive inversion. 4. Vivification rituals. 5. Ontological identity, and finally, 6. Post-flood continuity. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, Lexical and Ontological Distinctions. We need to strictly define our terms here. To truly grasp the framework we're dealing with, we absolutely have to rigorously define the baseline Hebrew terminology. This is the vocabulary that strictly, permanently separates the creator from the created order. In biblical terminology, when we're talking about idols, we're frequently running into the Hebrew word pezel. Now, pezel specifically denotes a carved object or graven image, usually fashioned from wood or stone. Alternatively, you might come across the word maseka, which refers to a cast metal image. But the key takeaway here is that these were objects explicitly crafted by human hands, constructed out of the natural created order. But then we have this incredible term, tselem. Tselem fundamentally translates to a three-dimensional statue or image. It's actually derived from a root word meaning to cut out. And in the context of the ancient Near East, this word was almost exclusively used to describe a physical three-dimensional presence. It functions as a proxy, a literal physical stand-in for the authority it represents, not just some symbolic or metaphorical reflection. And as we continue our forensic analysis today, you're going to see that the question of who gets to be the authorized tselem is really the beating heart of the entire biblical narrative. And that brings us directly to the Decalogue. According to the text in Exodus 24 and mirrored in Deuteronomy 5:8, you shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above. We really have to understand this prohibition across multiple dimensions. Theologically speaking, an idol is defined by its derivation. It comes from the created order rather than being generated by the Creator. So this biblical prohibition establishes the core ontological conflict we'll be discussing: the true, authorized living image versus unauthorized human-manufactured representations. The biblical prophets use this brilliant Socratic irony to constantly highlight the sheer absurdity of this. I mean, they point out how ridiculous it is to worship a block of wood that you literally just used to cook your dinner. Therefore, any physical image of another being intended to represent the divine is treated as an offensive, functional replacement of the true imago Dei. Moving right along to Section 2, the Divine Creation Protocol, we're looking at the concept of the royal proxy. To understand this royal protocol properly, we have to situate ourselves firmly within the ancient Near Eastern context. In the ancient world, a king would frequently erect a tselem, a physical, three-dimensional statue of himself in the far-flung reaches of his territory where he couldn't physically be present. That localized statue was his proxy. It signaled his dominion, his legal presence, and his unquestionable sovereignty over that region. According to Old Testament scholar J.R. Middleton, the mandate to subdue and have dominion is the direct functional consequence of being made in the image. This is massive. In Genesis 1:26-28, God is taking this exact widely understood political and theological framework and applying it to humanity. The human is placed in the cosmic temple, which is the Garden of Eden, to actively mediate the Creator's universal authority. You, the human, are the living, breathing representative placed squarely in the territory of Earth to legally manifest the sovereign's dominion. Now, we're looking at some ancient Mesopotamian and Egyptian artifacts here. And while we've been discussing humans acting as proxies, I have to explicitly, strictly state a crucial theological distinction. Humans are never to be called idols. Ever. This is a fundamental divergence in the text. You see, idols are dead objects. They are chunks of wood, stone, and gold. But, and this is absolutely vital to understand, in the ancient worldview, these dead objects were intimately connected to actual real spiritual entities who were actively attempting to usurp earthly dominion. Through high places and local shrines, ancient peoples were trying to anchor a specific false spirit's dominion over their agriculture, or their politics, or their warfare. Idols are dead objects facilitating the localized power of other rebellious spirits. Humans, conversely, are the authorized, dynamic, living image of Yahweh. The physical idol is nothing but an impotent usurper, attempting to replicate the delegated authority that rightfully belongs only to the living human proxy. This takes us into Section 3, Idolatry is Recursive Inversion. This is where we see ancient humanity attempting to reverse engineer God. Let's walk through an exhaustive side-by-side comparative analysis so we can see the exact mechanics of this rebellion. It's truly fascinating when you look at the sequence. The original divine creative sequence is straightforward, robust, and beautiful. The Creator takes action and forms the human from the dust of the earth. He then breathes his own spirit directly into the human. And the result of that? Dynamic, global dominion achieved through living human proxy. God's creation action delegates authority so that his image and likeness exercise dominion on earth. Now look at idolatry. It attempts to literally reverse engineer this exact sequence. In the ancient idolatry inversion, the human tries to act as the creator, forming statues from the earth or from metal. But here's the catch. Because humans cannot provide actual, genuine life, they have to use elaborate incantations and breathing rituals to merely simulate the breath of life. And the end goal? To achieve a localized, static dominion via an idol proxy for other gods. The biblical critique emphasizes the complete absurdity of this inversion. The prophets point out that a human craftsman forms a god using the exact same Hebrew verb yetzar that is used for God forming man from the dust. It is a complete, total inversion of the source-object relationship.
So why on earth would ancient humanity do this? According to biblical scholar G.K. Beale, the idol serves as a domesticated version of the divine, a technological attempt to manifest presence without the unpredictable sovereignty of the Creator. Think about that for a second. God's dominion through humans is designed to be mobile, dynamic, and expansive. We are literally commanded to fill the earth. But idolatry attempts to tether divine power to a fixed, controllable point. By placing an idol in a temple, or a bama, which is a high place, ancient peoples were essentially setting up a static legal embassy for a specific deity's power. It was an attempt to control and capture spiritual presence, to make it predictable and geographically bound. In fact, it was so geographically bound that when an ancient army captured a rival city's idol, it was literally interpreted as image snapping, meaning the absolute removal of that deity's dominion and protection from the region.
Which leads us to Section 4, Vivification Rituals. Let's look at how they simulated life. Let's break down the scholarly reality of these cultic ceremonies because they are incredibly detailed. In both Mesopotamian and Egyptian civilizations, simply manufacturing a statue didn't make it an idol. The process wasn't considered complete until a highly complex vivification ritual was performed to awaken the spirit within the wood or stone. In Mesopotamia, this was the mispah, an elaborate 11-stage ritual spanning 2 whole days. In Egypt, they performed the Wepet air ritual. When we do a logical hard scan across these different cultures, we find 3 incredibly consistent components. First, purification. The priests had to literally remove the humanness of the object. They had to clean off the craftsman's fingerprints through specific incantations. Second, inspiration. They simulated childbirth and breathing, and scholars, get this, in Egypt, priests actually used a forked blade called a pesiskef. This wasn't just any blade, it was a medical tool specifically used to cut the umbilical cord of human newborns. They would use this pesiskef to touch the mouth of the idol, simulating a birth. Finally, authentication. They would ritualistically open the mouth and eyes so the statue could theoretically eat and see. It was a highly detailed, exhaustively documented attempt to pretend to give birth to these objects. And to legitimize this artificial proxy, the priests had to somehow solve the glaring logical paradox of a human creating a god. According to historians Walker and Dick, in their extensive study of ancient Mesopotamian cult images, the ritual text explicitly claimed, this statue was not made by a human, it was born in the heavens. This is known in the literature as the incantation of denial. During the ceremony, the craftsman's hands were symbolically cut off or tied up, and they would literally swear oaths that they did not make the idol. They had to logically, forcefully deny the human manufacturing process in order to simulate a divine origin. The sheer ridiculousness of this denial really highlights the profound theological desperation required to legitimize a newly inhabited proxy. Now, the biblical writers weren't operating in a vacuum. They were intimately, acutely aware of these ancient rituals, and they used them as forensic evidence to ruthlessly mock the futility of idols. Notice the logical breakdown we have here. While humans use incantations to pretend to give breath, Yahweh actually breathed Nishmat Shayim, the true breath of life, directly into the human. When the prophet Habakkuk says, "Woe to him who says to wood, awake," there is no breath at all in it. he isn't just making a general insult, he is specifically surgically mocking the absolute failure of the Mispi and Wepet air ceremonies. God formed us from natural dust. We form idols from luxury gold. God gives dynamic global dominion. Idols give static territorial dominion. The rigorous biblical logic dictates that the image must come from the creator, while idolatry assumes the image as the creator. It is all, as the prophets would say, Hebel, vapor, absolute vanity.
Moving to Section 5, Ontological Identity. We need to move beyond this idea of mere reflection.
For centuries, heavily influenced by later Greek and Platonic philosophy, people have viewed the image of God through what we can call a mirror model. They think of humans as mere reflectors. But let's think about that. A mirror reflection is a two-dimensional external optical illusion. It actually implies that the original is absent, far away up in heaven somewhere, and we are just catching a faint glint of light down here on Earth. A strict linguistic and forensic analysis of the Hebrew text completely, categorically rejects this model. Humans do not simply reflect an image. They actually are the image. The biblical model is a 3D essential internal reality. You are the actual proxy operating with delegated authority. When the text uses the word likeness, the Hebrew word demet, it implies a substantive correspondence. Because humans possess actual spirit and breath, they are living correspondences capable of making volitional decisions that legally, physically affect the material world. You are completely, ontologically more than a mere reflector. You are the authorized intersection of heaven and earth. To deepen this analysis even further, consider this brilliant insight from biblical scholar D.J.A. Kleins. According to Kleins, quite literally, humans are the statues of Yahweh. Remember our lexical distinction from earlier? Selim is a 3D statue. When the Bible applies this exact word to humans, it makes the radical Socratic claim that to be the imago Dei is the human's fundamental biological and spiritual hardware, not just some added software trait you can download or delete. You are the dynamic, living embodiment of Yahweh's presence. To really grasp this, think about why an ambassador legally embodies a country. We must root this theological concept in ancient political realism. An ambassador carries the full weight, the voice, and the legislative power of the sovereign. They don't just remind people of the sovereign, they legally stand in as the sovereign's active proxy in a foreign domain. Therefore, the humanist Selim is a permanent, biologically anchored designation of royalty and dominion over the entire created order. This brings us to our final core topic, Section 6, Post-Flood Continuity. Let's examine the legal reality. Now, you might be wondering, was this incredible ontological status lost or corrupted in the Garden of Eden? To answer that, we must exhaustively exegete Genesis 9:6. God is speaking to Noah, and he says, "Whoever sheds human blood, by humans shall their blood be shed, for in the image of God has God made mankind." This is absolutely paramount. God issues this legal decree after the fall and after the total cataclysmic judgment of the flood. This proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that the image was neither erased nor destroyed by human corruption. The text creates a direct, binding legal if-then equation. The reason for the highest possible legal penalty, capital justice, is based entirely 100% on the victim's ontological identity. The image remains the permanent legally binding basis for justice.
So to summarize this blood-for-blood protocol, the post-flood legal reality is straightforward. The image is permanent. Therefore, an assault on a human mathematically equals a direct assault on the creator. Because humans actually are the living, localized proxies of the sovereign, destroying a human is literally committing high treason against the authority that the proxy represents. Furthermore, life is localized in the blood, so shedding human blood drains the image's life force from the earth itself. Because of this, God delegates judicial authority directly to humans to manage and protect the sanctity of the image. We are uniquely tasked with policing the sanctity of our own kind, precisely because of the immense, undiminished gravity of the Imago Dei.
Which brings us to the final provocative thought of our explainer today. If the human form is the permanent, legally binding intersection of heaven and earth, how must this rewrite our modern understanding of global dominion and human dignity? If we're not just passive reflectors catching light from afar, but the actual, living proxies of the divine, how does that fundamentally change the way we view every single person we interact with? I challenge you to reevaluate human ontology through this robust forensic framework. Once you see it, it changes absolutely everything. Thank you so much for diving deep into this heavy material with me today. Keep studying, keep analyzing the text, and I hope this leaves you wanting to learn even more. See you next time.